Greetings, dear ones. I am Observer. I am so thrilled to join you this day to tell you what is taking place. There are many places throughout the universe that we look at. You keep changing the words, so it's difficult for us to say all that is, because now you confine the universe with quadrants and different segments. So we will say all that is, because we are not limited by the way that you define things, and especially me. That is my job. That is what I do, which is why I am called Observer. And that is a self-chosen title, by the way. The idea of the whole observation is to be able to see something and to simply take it in without judgment. To be able to categorize something. To be able to observe. Very simply, to observe. And to be able to look at things without the taint that you would normally say, where you're looking for something, or you're looking for an outcome. And as such, I've been able to see many places throughout all that is, that have life, very similar to planet Earth. Yes, there are many that have life totally different than you. There are many places throughout the universe where their main concern is dealing with gravity, not yours. You deal with gravity, but not the same way many others do. So there are certain aspects having to do with where you are, what environment you're in, and so forth, that really determine how your world is going to play out. But we've also tell you that there are many things that are just simply by choice, especially, and this is not just humans, this is spirit pretending to be separate from each other in whatever game you're playing throughout the universe. And many of you have played various games in different places throughout the universe. It's why you can look at the sky sometime and you'll have a warm place in your heart for the Sirius cluster. Sometimes you'll feel that you're drawn to the dog store. You're drawn to different places, things that you have this warmth about, and you have no idea why. Well, sometimes you were there. Sometimes you might have been an active part of that evolution. There are many places like this, and there are, of course, your own other 11 dimensions of time-space that also exist at the same time frame as you do. But that's an interesting point, and that's one of the things that we wish to talk about. There comes a point where you're in this linear time frame, and that is how you have to experience the illusion of time in one moment at a time. That's all you can do. You can't take it all in at once. You can't say, this is my time frame, I'm going to experience all this or all that. You have to take it one drip at a time. The nature of the illusion. So with that, know that that influences much of what you're doing and much of the way that you perceive things. And in almost all places throughout the universe, throughout all that is, you'll find that many times what happens is the first energy that lands on a planet tends to repeat itself over and over and over again. And that is a fascinating observation that I get to see in many different places throughout the universe. And even if I were to ask a person, why do your people do that? What is that about? Most of the time they'll simply say, oh, it's just a custom. It's part of the built-in energy of who we are. And they really don't understand what they're doing. They're simply doing it out of repetition. Your bodysuits have a bias, many different biases that influence who you are in the world around you. And one of those influences is repetition. So when you see things that repeat in your field, even if you totally disagree with them, all of a sudden after they've repeated it a number of times, you now have a place for it. Even if you disagree with it, you'll still have a place for it. You'll know that it exists somewhere. So you're all biased with repetition. And what happens is when you grow up with something of this nature, and even after you go through generations of different people that come in to take over the governments, to evolve the way that you do business, to evolve the way that you handle with humanity, what happens is each place throughout the universe typically recreates the same thing that they created by their stepfathers. It happens over and over and over again. One of the things that has happened here on planet Earth is the male domination. It absolutely has been an old boys club, still is in many of your governments, in case you haven't noticed, but still very much is basically that whole process that we've been talking for a very long time about feminine rising. And we'll tell you in a very short time, Merlia is going to come in and speak exactly of that to finish up this topic for today. But in the meantime, I get to tell you about a place that I visited regularly. In fact, I've fallen deeply in love with this place. Yes. I've spoken of this place before many times. It's called Eris. And Eris is basically a planet it's actually a star system that exists in different ways. And they've actually learned to move between planets in that star system. So it's difficult to say that it's one area in general, but it's basically a star system that has evolved. They've evolved in different ways because they have been around a lot longer than Earth and humanity. They have evolved through different ways. But again, a lot of their energy was spent on survival things and things to evolve them to evolve. But they had one important imprint early on that has continued and continued and continued and repeated over and over and over again. And that is that the feminine is in charge. Exactly the opposite of what you have on planet Earth. And neither one of them is right or wrong. It's simply something that has evolved and repeated itself over and over and over again. Now, on Eris, there is plenty of men and masculine energy in their governments. There are many of the teachers, there are many beings around that are carrying that masculine energy and working with it and being able to balance that energy. So very similar to planet Earth as far as your evolution and balancing your duality, so to speak, because that's what takes a step out of the duality experiment, out of the third dimension and into the fifth, requires the balancing of this duality, which is your sexual energy. Very simple. It's the reason you have asexual people showing up. It's the reason you have people making choices they've never made before about their sexuality, even at very young ages, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be working with things. They have choices now that weren't here before. Well, as a result of that, you have another wonderful connection with this star system. Now, the star system has very similar attributes that planet Earth has. It's dealing with a lot of pollution. You're dealing with time frames that are running short. You're dealing with an overburdening of at least 2 of the 3 planets that support life in that star system. And that is causing similar challenges and evolution being forced upon the planet. It's also causing a resurgence of the old energy, which in that case is the old feminine energy. The old feminine energy that used force in many ways. Now, the way we describe feminine energy on your planet and the way we describe feminine energy over there are slightly different, very similar in many ways, because the feminine tends to work on a different level than the masculine. The masculine will tend to work on the outside of the bodysuit, very simple. The feminine will tend to work a little bit deeper. One is not better than the other. They simply work differently, and because of that, they appear differently in the world. So one of the things that's taking place is Eris has its own timeline. Now, here's an interesting situation, because you're about to experience a timeline cross with Eris. And that will actually be happening toward the middle of December, and probably stretching through, it looks like at this point, much of February of next year. So there is a very interesting thing that takes place with that. I'll let Merlia tell the rest of the story of the timeline cross and what that means and what takes place. But you have the opportunities now around between the 15th and the 17th of December to start a timeline cross. This will be a very interesting situation, especially since you are so polar opposite in the area of domination of your sexes. Interesting situation. This is going to cause all sorts of things to rise to the surface very quickly. Yes, some of it will be negative. Some of it will be reactionary. Some of it will be, oh, we have to stop this. We have to fight against this and take our stand. And we can't do that. We have to be anti-woke or whatever you end up calling it. Yes, sometimes you move very fast, but that is what is taking place right now. So with that, I will bring in Maria at this point. Let her tell the rest of the story. It is a pleasure doing work with you in this way, to be able to reflect other places throughout what we see on planet Earth, to be able to share with you that vision of who you are, because you are more special than you could possibly imagine. And we'll tell you that the eyes of the universe are on humanity. And now, on the beings of Eris as well. Take a breath, dear ones, and let me bring in my sister. Greetings, dear ones. I am Maria. I join you this day with such joy, for there is a very miracle that is taking place, as the observers just recently spoke. What would it be like, since you've opened up this portal, since you've opened up the opportunity for help in different ways? What would it be like if all of a sudden this wonderful warm blanket of feminine energy came in and was laid down upon planet Earth? That's exactly what this looks like. That is the process that is now in front of you. Beginning late in mid to late December, working its way in different areas, you will see a lot of resistance on your planet from the masculine energy. But this is a timeline cross, so you're also affecting their planet. They will be in the opposite way. They will have their beings that will wish to break that connection, that will wish to stop it, that will feel threatened by the new information coming in. Same as yours. But the interesting thing is, with this blanket that's laid down, yes, people will feel it. There will be a connection. There will be an opportunity. And as we mentioned, many people will react to it. They'll even react negatively, like they're being controlled in some way. But once the initial fade, once the initial reaction has taken place, you'll feel the warmth and love of that blanket. And that's what we're going to ask all of you to do, is to put your energy and your love into that feeling, because it's there for everyone at that point. Now, does it mean everybody's going to feel it? No, of course not. There'll be many who just simply aren't interested in feeling anything. They just want to get to their next place where they're going. They want to do whatever they're doing and whatever they feel is important in their life. But this is something that can change all of humanity very quickly. That's happened before. What is a timeline cross? Well, as we mentioned before, you experience time in a linear fashion, one moment at a time. That means that it's in a line, which is where the word linear comes from. See, we're very smart on this side of the bill. So what happens is you've got these lines, but they don't all run parallel, do they? Because you have all that is out here. So there are times when you have a line going this way and a line going this way and another line going this way and lines going all these other places. There are times when timelines cross each other. Now, the majority of the time this happens, and this happens on a fairly regular basis. The majority of the time they happen at somewhat of a 90-degree angle. The timeline is here, their timeline is here. They come on, they imprint each other, and they move on. Now, that imprint becomes permanent. It is felt on both sides. It is permanent. So all of a sudden, there's a new memory, there's a new imprint on both timelines, wherever these are, whether these are two different spatial beings, which is what we're talking about, having to do with Eris and planet Earth, or whether they're simply other dimensions. It works the same. So you have your timelines that you're in. Now, you can't cross with yourself. That's an interesting situation. Why? Because your timelines are not actually in the linear fashion that you think. They're actually in a torus. And they're actually circulating around your whole being this whole time. And it's not possible to take those lines and actually tilt them to where they can cross. But it is possible for you to cross the line of another being or of another expression of light, another group of beings playing the game. Now, this has happened many times. We tell you much of your memories of Christ were a timeline imprint. Very simple, very permanent. They'll be with you forever. You will remember that. You have certain stories that continue to repeat over and over, and even though they may be classified as fictional stories, they never change, and they repeat, and they keep resurfacing, and they keep resurfacing. The whole stories about Merlin, the whole stories about King Arthur are such a timeline cross that took place. Now, as we mentioned, most of these happen very quickly. They come across because they're at a 90-degree angle. But what happens when a timeline crosses at a very light angle to where there's actually a lot of cross? And there's actually a lot of time where they cross each other. In those situations, dear ones, the imprints become huge. And that is what's happening with you and the planet Eris. You're crossing each other at an extreme angle, almost walking side by side for a very long time before the cross actually starts to happen. And it takes a while. That's why we're telling you it will begin in late December of this year and probably carry out through the first part, at least, of next year, into probably February and maybe even March of next year. That is a huge timeline cross. During that time, you're going to be busy. You're going to have your things that you're dealing with every day. You're still playing with war on your planet. You're doing other things of that nature that you're still working with. Those will still continue in the normal way. But there's a new blanket of feminine energy here that can ground itself. And on Eris, there's a new energy of masculine energy that is laying down to balance the feminine. And we'll tell you, dear ones, out of balance is out of balance. No matter who's out of balance, when you're out of balance, you're in trouble. Real simple. That's where all of your illnesses come from, being out of balance somewhere. Energetically, emotionally, sometimes physically. That's where it all comes from. So the idea is to find that balance. What happens here, this timeline cross is going to be elongated because of that. That is magical. So in the beginning, it will be very gentle. It won't be an abrupt timeline cross. It'll cross very slowly in the very beginning toward the end of December. Start working its way into your reality as much as possible. What determines how long it will stay? How well it is accepted. There is polarity everywhere, and when you have opposites, we mentioned, you're going to have fear, you're going to be threatening the masculine energy that's in charge here. And over there on Eris, you're going to be threatening the feminine energy, which has a very strong hold on everything. And we mean everything over there. Similar to planet Earth in many ways, but probably even a little bit more so. Many of your religions are only allowed to have representatives of the feminine aspect. Interesting. Yeah, so with these cross over each other, they leave these imprints. And most of the time, they're not, oh, I'm going to rethink this, or we're going to do this, we're going to do this. What happens is they leave these base stories. Just like Merlin, just like King Arthur, just like Christ. And if the stories have value, you create them. Because you're creator beings. That's what you do. You create your reality. Do you think it is a coincidence that all the things that have been in your science fiction movies and television programs have now manifested on your planet? You're creator beings. Those seeds were planted with those books, with those television programs, with those movies. How did that happen? It's real simple. You show these movies to a whole bunch of conscious creators and they've manifested it. Happens all the time. How come no? So with that, you will see, as we mentioned, the opportunities toward moving toward connection. Now, there are many aspects that are also taking place on planet Earth. Some of this simply has to do with control, with money, with politics, with other things of that nature which are rampant on your planet right now. You are being divided, very intentionally divided. You cannot be conquered unless you are divided. So you are being consciously divided. The feminine energy can bring that back. That is something they do not have a problem with on Eros. Very simple. On Eros, they do not have that problem at all because the feminine energy deals quite differently with it than the masculine energy deals with it. Interesting situations. So with that, we want you to celebrate it. We want you to put your love, everything that you can, into this blanket of feminine energy, into this blanket of harmony. And if you don't want to call it feminine energy, you can call it something else. It doesn't make any difference. It will be a new breath of fresh air on your planet, starting toward the middle, toward the end, 15th, 17th, 19th, somewhere around there, December. And again, coming in very slowly, over-imprinting, overlaying each other. You're liable to have some big discussions in different areas. Again, maybe not changes. You may not change in that short of time frame, but very important energies will be planted during those times. Take them in and enjoy that ride. You've earned it. That is a timeline cross. And you've had many of them happen on your planet. You've had many of them happen during your game. They all affect you. Some of them, they all affect you in different ways. And some of them you'll say, oh, this was a terrible timeline cross, and this was a good one, and this was a bad one. You gain something from every experience you have of pretending to be a human. So don't restrict yourself by telling yourself that you're going to get something from it or not, or it's going to be good or bad. We'll tell you one of the most interesting things that took place and changed humanity very drastically with a timeline cross. And that was one of your financial collapses. Happened as a result of a timeline cross. 1929, the stock market crash, the big one, that caught everybody by surprise, was a timeline cross. Now, you can look back at that if you experienced that, if you were one of the people that were jumping out of the buildings at that time. Whatever the case, you could say, oh, that was horrible. It was a terrible experience. And yet, when you get down the road, humanity learned so much from that they could not have learned any other way, and agreed on things, found that harmony of things. That's perfect. That was very magical and very important. So that aspect is in motion now. Timeline cross is coming. Enjoy this journey. Know that you have great opportunities with this. Yes, it is a bit of an opposition because of the fact that you have your dualities reversed between Eris and planet Earth, and yet you're moving at an incredible pace. Enjoy this journey, dear ones, and know that every time you repeat something over and over and over again, you tend to look in the same directions all the time. Maybe you'll start looking in a slightly different direction now. Enjoy the journey. We leave you for the time being, but we're here with you always. You are part of us, we are part of you. There is an innate connection that holds the energies for everyone. You are part of our heart, and we lend you ours at every moment. The work you are doing on planet Earth is far greater than you could possibly imagine. It doesn't just affect Earth. It affects all that is. And you, dear ones, you are the greatest angels that have ever lived. Welcome home. Welcome home. I leave you now for a short time, but as I mentioned, we'll be with you always. I am Merlia. I am the feminine aspect of Merlin. Enjoy the journey, dear ones. Know that every step of your path is leaving a trail of light behind it that will be followed at some point. Know that you are part of a large family of light, and we send you that energy every chance we get. Welcome home. I am Maria. Come up and see me sometime. That's what I do.